everyone, and good morning. Welcome to our live feed update for March 28th. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, and with me today is Maggie. How you doing, Maggie?
Hi, Taran. Hi, everybody. So much has happened since the last time I was on. Just so many things. Everything is changing. It feels like moment to moment. It's stressful to do one of these updates lately because you're like, there's so much, like so many conversations. I only have so much time to like sit and watch. I wanted to watch the Oscars last night and I was like going back and forth, making sure that I got everything. So I can only imagine how it is for you right now, Taran.
Yeah, I think I was saying this the other day on Twitch. I think this could be the most difficult season to cover since I started covering seasons because of just how much is going on at all times. I have so many notes everywhere. They don't stop.
Seriously, I'm like bookmarking furiously tweets to make sure that I have my timeline correctly. And I swear I bookmarked like 30 tweets yesterday on top of watching everything. And then got up this morning to go over all the clips again to make sure that I was like writing down exactly what they were saying. And it's just so, because you have a house full of gamers. Like, I know that maybe the ratings aren't super reflective of how hard everybody's playing because they're all still like they're spread out the way that they would be in a regular season. I feel like there has to be a curve on the season because even the people who are fives are gaming, like they are. And I think that there's just so much. There's just a lot.
Quite a lot. We are going to update you on all of it, or at least as much of it as we can here on the update today. We're, of course, going to update you on everything that happened yesterday on the Big Brother Canada 10 live feeds. It was day 30 in the house. 30 days. We're not quite at the halfway mark yet, but we're getting there. We're getting there. We started the day early in the morning. We mentioned yesterday, of course, just a quick reset. Jess is the HOH. They nominated Moose and Herman. Herman won the veto, and Jess is going to have to name a replacement nominee. Jess got into it with Moose about whether he said that Betty deserved to be there or not, and Marty tied a bunch of shoes together late into the night. So when Jess woke up in the morning, they started untying the shoes, thinking, who did this to Marty's shoes? Only to realize when Marty came out, Marty was like, what are you doing to the shoes that I tied together? And they were like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought people had done this to you. I was trying to help. And then to themselves, they said, this is how terrible I am at the social game.
Hard agree. After watching Jess the past couple days, hard agree.
Yes.
There's just something that's not connecting, within the house. And I think that there's a lot that happens today and obviously yesterday, Anyways.
Well, so they have a conversation. They tell Marty that somebody close to Moose has to go up and that Moose has to go. But if the house decides to turn on T, the person that would go up that is close to Moose, that's up to them. Tanisha is very strong. They say that Gino has realized now that he messed up last week because he did the work for other people who are now not reciprocating that sort of like, they're not really like talking to him as much anymore. Gino and Summer have been drifting a little bit. Gino has kind of felt like Summer's not giving him as much time of day as she did when he was HOH and trying to get him to put his friend up on the block, which, yeah, duh. And they talk about how Marty accidentally told Betty too much information when Betty was giving him a massage. They're like, you can't trust anyone in here apart from me and Kevin. And he's like, I know, but she was just giving me a massage and I just wasn't thinking. And Marty says, look, I honestly think T is the one that should go home. I know Moose is the one that you want. And Jess is like, that's not necessarily what I want. He's like, okay, good, because I think T is the one that should go.
Yeah, I think that for Jess, the thing that I hope they understand as the day goes on and there's many conversations that they have is that if they put up T, like there's no way to smooth this over. Excuse me. There's not like T is not a pawn that you put up and everybody's like, okay. And then you vote out Moose. Like it gets messy. And if you want to put up T, like there's going to be repercussions for that. So if you know, yesterday got in this fight with Moose and you've decided that you really want Moose to go, putting up T is not the best because you're going to make an enemy out of T and Summer and Betty. I just think that they're not thinking in a way where it's like, how do I get out of this with all of my relationships better? They're thinking, how do I get out of this with a stronger, solid side with me? But the problem is Jess is, as you've said a million times in the updates, Jess is considered expendable by so many people. And I'm not sure that they've done enough this week. Like by keeping Gino off the block, I'm not sure that they're doing enough to where next week people will be like, well, Jess is very hard in our alliance and like Jess is very important to my game. Like I think that there's still so much room for Jess to find themselves in a sticky situation. And by putting up T, it only like elevates their target level. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I mean, I think the important thing here is that obviously with the altercation that occurred between Jess and Moose, it was really looking like obviously like Jess would definitely want Moose gone, but here in the morning with especially with Marty sort of like pushing, it does feel like Jess is open to the idea of targeting Tanisha, which if they decided to do so would potentially mean that Tanisha would leave. You know, I think we'll be looking at the votes as we go, particularly during a conversation with Kevin. But I mean, if Jess gives the okay, it makes it a lot more likely that that Tanisha could be the one to go here. So that's I think what we need to be looking at as we run through the day. Will Jess want Tanisha gone, and if so, can the votes get there?
But if Jess does not want Tanisha gone, do you think that Tanisha is the right pawn for Jess to be picking?
I mean, they can't put up anybody from they can't put up like Marty or Gino or any of them because they would just straight up leave. Right? Like if they want Moose gone, then it has to be somebody like Tanisha or Summer. You know, even I mean, certainly we know by the end of the day, Kevin would leave.
Yeah.
Helena would probably still leave. Like most people would probably leave over Moose because Moose is working closely with Herman and with Tanisha and Summer and Betty enough to the point where they would probably decide, you know what, screw Jess, especially after all this talk, and we're gonna keep Moose.
Yeah. And I think that the biggest issue is that Jess, just with everything that happened yesterday and today with Summer, T, and Betty, like has completely destroyed their relationship with them. Like they never will trust them. Even if they decided not to go through with it, putting up T, they have completely destroyed their relationship with Summer and T and Betty by even like talking about this. And then there's a lot of talk of like, well, I just feel like you guys don't trust me. And it's like, yes, because you're telling people that you're going to put Tanisha on the block and possibly blindside her. So yes, of course they don't trust you. It's a very it's just, I feel like there's a lot of they were just really messy about it, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Do you disagree?
I mean, yes. I mean, definitely very messy, right? Like, I think that given the chosen course, which was I'm going to try to work with Gino and Jace because they just made a dumb
Mhm.
decision and they're kind of on the outs now. And like because of that, I'm going to move in this direction. Like everything they've done subsequently is, I think,
Yeah.
like the right strategic decision, but the method with which they've gone about it has been awful. I think the strategic decision you can question is that initial decision of which sort of
Exactly.
route to take, right? Because
Mhm.
there is a world where they could have just gone like more all in on the Summer Tanisha side of things.
Yes.
There was a big divide between Summer Tanisha and Herman and Moose that they could have exploited.
Mhm.
And they and like they still could try to get out, Moose or Herman. I do think that Moose or Herman are the best targets in general for Jess, regardless of which side they try to work. But I remember on an update, I think at the start of the week, I said that the path that Kevin is kind of pushing them down is not the best path for them. It's the best path for Kevin because it leaves Kevin
Yeah.
open to work with Summer and Tanisha and more of the house. Whereas it pushes
Mhm.
Jess into a corner, and that Jess should be trying to work on Summer as much as possible to make that connection be separate from their connection to Kevin. And I feel
Yes.
like that was what was important for Jess. And instead, especially because of the veto results, they are now being forced to do the complete opposite, which is only further pushing them down into a hole. And there's not an easy way out of it at this point because they've already kind of
Mhm.
made their bed. And at some point you
Yep.
have to be able to recognize that maybe I just need to like full reset and just blow everything up because it's starting to look really not great.
Yes, that thank you for laying it all out there like that, Taran. Like, I think that that's what I really needed to hear because I think that, like, all of these decisions that Jess has made in regards to putting up Tanisha and all of that all lead back to them deciding to work with Gino and Jace, like, hardcore. And
Mhm.
I think that, like you just said, like, that is where the issue lies. And since then, their game has unraveled because if that's the path they wanted to go down, I feel like it causes more tension and more difficulty for them in the house overall than it does if they had decided not to go down that path. But that's their prerogative to decide which way they want to go and who they want to work with. So I think that, like, the reporting that is being done today all like ties back to that decision. And like you said, it's starting to unravel, and their standing is within the house at large, I feel, is moving further away from where they wanted to be by the end of the week.
Yeah, and they even said at one point today, I think to Kevin, like maybe I should have just put up like Herman and Gino or Moose and Gino, um, because then maybe Gino wins that veto, and like I'm in a much better spot where I can replace Gino with Moose or Herman or vice versa
Mhm.
or like whatever. Like and that's kind of the thing. Like you never want to and I appreciate what they were going for here. It's what Kevin was sort of pitching to them is keep it simple. I
Mhm.
like the simplicity that they attempted here, but as an HOH, you never want to be in a position where you know that the veto will screw you,
Mhm.
especially in a season where every single week the veto has been won by a nominee, and it's very likely that it's going
Yeah.
to happen. And this is kind of the position that they've been put in, and they're trying to the problem is like the way that they're trying to get out of the trouble that they're in because of the veto is a pretty standard sort of strategic method where they're like, oh, I just need to hide our relationship. I'm just, it's because of where the votes would lie, and that's worked in the past, but they don't have as they've said, the social chops to pull it off, and Summer is
Mhm.
in particular is seeing right through it. It's which is not to say that, like, similar to Gino last week, it's not necessarily going to end in disaster for Jess. There are plenty of other targets around, and things could
Mhm.
still theoretically work out. But this is definitely not heading down the path that they were hoping.
And I do think that if Jess had decided not to go well, I think the reason that Jess decided to go down the Jace Gino route, correct me if I'm wrong, is because of their relationship with Jace.
Yeah.
But I do think that if they had decided to put up Gino and really work on this week their relationship with T, Summer, and Betty, and like really, really hunker down with them. Gino goes, where does Jace have to turn? Jace still is like, who does Jace have at that point? I do think that there's a world where they could have done that instead, but this path that they've gone down, I think, is putting them in a much stickier situation.
So my primary thing about nominating Gino is that, you know, Gino opens his conversation with Jess at the start of the week saying, I get it if you put me up. I just put you up. Right. And the thing about Gino and Jace is that, look, if I'm in that house, of course I want to work with them. They're kind of big dummies. Like they're much more they're much easier to manipulate. But because of that, they're also much easier to put up on the block and say, tit for tat, sorry, I have to use you as a pawn. And then you work on your relationship with Summer, Tanisha, and Betty. And if you get them to vote out Moose over Gino, fantastic. Everything worked out perfectly. Or Herman over Gino. If they flip on you and they take out Gino, I'm so sorry, Jace. I got played.
Exactly.
And so, like, either way, you're okay. And you can still go back to Summer, Tanisha, and Betty and be like, and because you're not actually pushing that hard. And you can be like, hey, it's cool. I wanted Gino to go too. I'm still with you guys. And you can kind of go back and forth. So I think that's like, I get where Jess came from strategically at the start of the week, but you do have to account for this veto being so prevalent, especially in this season.
And you can't play.
Yeah,
they just can't
like,
play for the veto.
Exactly. Like this is more of a BBUS strategy than a BB Can strategy to put the two targets straight up on the block with no really good alternatives. It's just yet again, it's another situation where like Jess is now in a spot where they're about to put up an ally on the block.
Exactly.
And you never ever want to be in a situation where you do that. And you can argue like how much of an ally really is T. This is kind of a fake alliance a little bit, but either way, a fake alliance doesn't mean that it's not an alliance.
Totally. And also, I do think that there's so many. How many times have you gotten on here, Taran, and been like, oh, this alliance is fake? And then 2 weeks later, because the right people won HOH, it's the realest alliance in the game. Like, Jess, this alliance was like fairly fake, right? But if Jess this week, like I said, really works closely with Summer, T, and Betty, and like really is like, this is the most important relationship to me in the game, while still being able to have the conversation on the side with Kevin, with Marty, and like they leave this week not being able to play HOH next week and really covered on all sides versus, they're saying, earlier in the day, like, I feel like they have been acting so weird, like Summer and T, like it just shows they don't trust me. And it's like, yeah, because there's rumor, like Marty told Betty, you're going to put T on the block. Of course they don't trust you. What work have you done to solidify that trust with them? And I'm very happy we had this conversation because the whole time I've been like, okay, I need to talk to Taran and work out exactly like where Jess has gone so wrong, because there was a way for none of this to happen. And the way that we just laid out was that. But, Jess has made their bed and they're going to have to lie in it now. And unfortunately, I do think Tanisha is going to be a casualty of it. And it is very unfortunate because it didn't have to be like that.
Definitely possible. And I want to reiterate too, like, if I'm going to point out like the biggest mistake that Jess makes here, I think overall it is just that they, it's the failure of their social game that's failing them the most. Like, I do think there was a strategic path that had a higher percentage of working here, but ultimately I think either path could have worked if they were able to pull off the conversations and they had the relationships in order to do it, and that's where like they've primarily failed. And then of course, like, you've got Kevin in their ear. Kevin has a lot of influence over them, and Kevin is definitely not working in their best interest. They're working in him and Helena's best interest. And so if Jess is going to kind of flounder as HOH, if that's what's necessary for what's best for Kevin, then that's what's going to happen. And as they said, they put all their marbles / eggs in Kevin's basket,
and Kevin is tossing them out of that basket, huh? One by one, just throwing them.
So, that was the first conversation of the day.
Yeah, no, well, I do this thing. If you are new and you haven't seen me on an update, I do this thing where Taran's like the first conversation of the day, and then I talk about all the strategic stuff that has been bugging me for the week. And then about 15 to 20 minutes in, we get into the events of the day. So that was what we just did.
So Jess implied to Marty, I don't necessarily care one way or another between Moose and Tanisha. Jess is going to talk to Kevin very briefly and says, I'm going to continue to act undecided all day so that I get as much information out of people as possible. And they say that they are actually set on what they want to do. I don't hate that notion. I like that they're trying to get information from people. I think that they were trying before and they were a little too obvious about it. They got caught by a few people. Now with the Indecision, they are getting a lot more information from people throughout the day. A lot of people are going to be divulging a lot of things. I think that's effective. But I think something that we've talked about before is that you do have to be careful about how much, indecision you give off, because if you give people too much hope throughout the throughout the week, and then it becomes clear that you were never going to do it in the first place, that can ultimately put you in a worse spot than before, especially because they have less time to sort of like get used to what you're doing. And it's kind of the thing where it's like people get more mad at Kevin than other people because they feel like Kevin doesn't have as much power. When you lack decisiveness as an HOH, as somebody in power, that makes people feel like they have more influence, they have more power over you, which means they're going to be more upset with you than they would be otherwise. Which is kind of what we're seeing here as the day progresses.
For sure, and to the point where, I mean, we'll get to it. Never mind. We don't have to go into something else that we're going to talk about again.
All right. Well, Herman is going to go to Marty. Herman has been on a mission. So the night before, day 29, Herman went to Gino and Jace, and he pitched to them that he wants to work with the stronger players in the game. He's done with the Summers and the Bettys and the people that are not going to be winning comps, are going to be throwing comps and not helping him in the game at all. And he's going to give that same pitch to Marty here in the morning. He says the stronger people should work together. Marty is a little bit less openly receptive to this idea than Gino and Jace were. Who Gino and Jace were both like, sure, we'll talk. Marty is like, Marty is Marty. He's an open book. He's basically like, look, this sounds all well and good, but I've heard my name a lot. I feel like you're close to the people who have said my name a lot. Like, what can you tell me about that situation? And Herman's like, I don't really want to give you much right now. And Marty's like, well, look, there's only so much that can be said. Actions are what's going to matter. I think to some degree he's correct, but you probably shouldn't be saying that to someone. You might as well just give him some lip service. He says, I do think we can repair this, but I want to know who's coming for me. And Herman says again, like, it's just hard to say anything right now with Jess in power. Anything could happen. I don't want to be opening my mouth too much. We'll talk more in the next few days is kind of the conclusion they come to in this conversation.
Yeah. And I do think that this, Herman does a lot of work today. After this conversation, he's going to go to Jess and talk with them. And I think that does help smooth things over a bit with Marty as the day goes on, based off of like these mistakes, I think, because then if he's going to people like Jess and Gino and saying the same thing that he's saying to Marty, it's like there's like a corralling of a group, if that makes sense.
Yeah, he's trying here as well. Like, and again, like, I appreciate everything that, like, you might as well be trying if you're Herman. If they're dumb enough to like listen, then great. Because his pitch is essentially, let's take out let's get all the stronger players together. We'll take out the weaker players. We'll start with Kevin and Helena. We'll keep all my people.
Yeah, the lions and the hyenas, but the hyenas are all yours.
Yes, exactly. Jace is going to talk with Helena, and Helena is letting Jace know that the women are really pushing for Kevin to go up, and she lets Jace know that Betty mentioned Jace's name, and that Betty has really been questioning Helena, like, oh, how close are you with Jace? And it was very annoying. And Jace says, well, that's fine, because Betty is who I would put up next if I won HOH. And
Oh my
so
gosh. Jace. Of course, that's Jace's target. Oh my lord.
yeah, so Helena, as expected, sort of like letting the cat out of the bag in terms of the conversation that happened between Summer, Tanisha, Betty, and Helena
Mhm.
the day before about who Jess should put up and what they're thinking in regard to that. This was very interesting. Jace says, "Oh, Helena." Now remember, Helena and Jace, like Helena and many individuals, have a thing, a
Mhm.
secret thing. So Jace is like, I think that Summer really is starting to want to switch sides. She's been approaching Gino and myself. I think she wants to jump ship a little bit. She's like really excited. She's like, I think we're gonna
Mhm.
get Summer. And Helena's like, oh no, be careful. I don't know how true that is. And Jason's like, oh yeah, no, yeah, sure, no, yeah, I know her loyalty lies with T. I'm sure. And Helena's like, definitely. She's like, yeah. I knew that. No,
But
I think Gino thinks Summer has a crush on him, which means he's got her, but like clearly that's not the case. She's with T. I knew that, obviously.
and Helena's like, "Well, did Gino really say this to Summer?" Like something that Summer said. Summer was like, "Wow, Gino said this to me," like sort of like feigned being upset about it to Helena to sort of like downplay the relationship with Gino. And Helena's like, "Did Gino actually say that to Summer?" And Jason was like, "No." And Helena was like, "Yeah, she's trying to downplay their relationship to me. Like I think that Summer thinks she has Gino." And Jace is like, "Yes, exactly. That's what I was worried about."
That's what I was actually saying. When I said that I thought
Uh-huh.
that Summer was gonna flip to us and that we had Summer, what I was actually saying is that she's playing us and that she thinks she has us. That's definitely what I
Uh-huh.
was saying.
For sure.
Uh, poor Summer. Helena just undid a ton of work Summer put in with Jason Chino.
Well, Summer is or not Summer, Helena is being a rat floater.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that she's best at, and I respect it. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, it stinks that it's going after Summer because Summer is so lovely. Watching her on feeds yesterday was like you guys have said on the roundtable, it's like such a bright light. And but I think that it's fun to watch, these different styles of gameplay like undercut each other at every turn. I think that that's very different and exciting, and why you're getting no sleep and having trouble reporting on it because like everyone takes two steps forward and then someone pushes them back, and it's different people every time.
Speaking of, Jace is going to talk with Marty now.
Mm-hmm.
And she's asking Marty how he feels about Josh. They both agree that Josh has been really shady lately. He's been reluctant to give names or say anything to them. He's been talking to them less. And this is kind of true. Josh has been less active this week so far. This is one of the things I was concerned about with Josh, that when he was having conversations, he was doing really, really well. He was in one of the best positions. But it seems like his sort of natural introverted inclinations are coming back, and he's not talking to people as often, and they're starting to get worried about him again. And so, both sides at this point. So they're worried about Josh. That's going to be a recurring theme throughout the day, with a lot of people talking about being worried about Josh now because they don't know where he will go. And Jace lets Marty know about Herman's pitch. That she's like, so Herman pitched to Gino and I that he wants to work with people that win. And Marty's like, oh, he just had the same conversation with me. But here's the thing. He refused to give any actual information. I think it's all lip service, basically. And so they both agree, like, they don't really trust Herman. They don't really feel like they're going to, like they can say what they want to Herman, but they don't really buy it. Jace is worried about the numbers at that point. Like, with no Herman, she just found out that Summer's not actually going to maybe flip with them. She's worried. She's worried about Josh, and she's worried that if Josh flips on them, as she's worried he might do, what if he pulls Jess with him, and Jess goes to the other side with Josh. And because she's still under the assumption that like Jess and Josh are like super tight.
When has Josh been in the HOH room at all this week? Like, when have you seen a single conversation with Jess and Jace?
Yeah. Josh,
Tongue
Jace,
twister.
Too many J's. Jess,
Yeah.
yeah. Marty says, "Don't worry, Jess is solid. Jess is with us." And he also says, "Well, by the way, Betty sucks. She's working with them. I gave her a bunch of information. He told them immediately. I can't believe Betty."
Oh my. Okay, so maybe I should have said, because I said like everybody's a gamer. What if what I meant is everybody is playing hard, whatever
Yes.
that means to them.
Yeah.
They are playing hard. Barely anybody is just sitting around. Everybody's
Very
at least
true.
trying to play. Yeah.
So Moose and Tanisha are going to briefly talk. Tanisha just mentions basically that she wants to push for Helena to go on the block. That's the plan. Helena being kind of like basically the most expendable person to them on that side, since it doesn't seem like it'll be Kevin, because Jess is too worried that Kevin would go, and Helena just seems like the perfect fit. So that's going to be one of the things that Tanisha pushes. Obviously, it's not really going anywhere to this point. Jess is going to talk with Josh, and this is exactly what like Josh has been doing lately, which is the conversation is pretty nothing. Like he basically just lays out the options for Jess. He's like, well, you could do this, and if you did this, then this would happen, or you could do this, and if you did that, then that would happen. And then he's like, and you know what? If it makes it easier, you could just put me up. And Jess is like, no, I don't want to put you. Like, why are you being like this? Like, why are you being paranoid? And then he just lets Jess talk at him for a long time, and then the conversation ends.
Yep. Social. I just think, yeah, Josh, like, the thing that sketches people out about Josh is that like when he has these conversations, like I'm not sure that he really cares which way Jess goes.
He's not giving any opinion either way. It's completely neutral.
So then people are like, he's not telling me his real opinion, but I think he just doesn't care either way, which he should.
I think he's very focused. He's very focused on maintaining that neutrality and maintaining the relationships that he has. But the problem is that in the Big Brother house, you need to have a stance, or people will start to be worried. Now, I don't think that the good thing is nobody's going to come for Josh anytime soon if he's neutral. But they might start excluding him from structures that could be bad. Now, this is not exactly a house of structures, so he might be good anyway. But you know, it's definitely, you know, it's weakening the relationships that he has with people, that he's maintaining so much neutrality.
Yes. Nobody likes Switzerland. Just kidding. Everybody likes Switzerland. But if everybody likes Switzerland, does anybody like Switzerland? You know?
I don't know. Jess is going to talk with Betty, and Jess is saying to Betty again, like, hey, I love you. I want to work with you. I do need to I just want to reiterate that, like, I need to be able to tell you things without you going and talking to other people, referring to when they told Betty that Moose said that Betty didn't deserve to be there, and then Betty went right to Moose. And Betty's like, you told me this already. And Jess is like, I know. I just it's important. Jess asks Betty who she thinks should go up. Betty agrees that yeah, if you put up a big target, they would probably go home and Moose wouldn't. So I get that you don't want to do that. You know, the options that you've already outlined have been fine for me, I think. You know, is Kevin not an option? No. You know, Jess is like, people have brought him up as an option, but you know, I don't really want to go in that direction. Betty says, ultimately, I don't think anybody in the siblings should go up, but I get that there aren't any really like good options. And Betty mentions that, like, I would love for us and Josh to like be in something, like be in like a named alliance.
And that's the thing that you're going to note, is that Betty and the other people in the siblings are like, why is Kevin not going up? Why is Marty not going up? Why is it us? And I think that that's a great question for them to be asking. You know, I think that that's very valid, and should be setting alarm bells off in their head. And it is, about why Jess is so willing to put up them, someone from their named alliance, and unwilling to put up people who Jess says they are not working with.
Yeah, and the two primary lines of reasoning there are that Jess doesn't have as good a relationship with Kevin, which is fake, right?
Mm-hmm.
That than they do with the siblings, and that they're worried that if they put, meaning I don't have the relationship with Kevin where he wouldn't be gunning for me after I put him up, like I'm trying to develop a relationship there. And then the second reason being, if I put Kevin up, I think the votes would flip against Kevin, and Moose wouldn't leave, and Moose is my target. And Betty, the first reason doesn't really land for anybody, but the second reason
Mm-hmm.
does land with Betty. Betty gets that, like, I get it. If Kevin went up, maybe the votes would flip. So
Mm-hmm.
Betty's kind of the person that gets it the most that Kevin wouldn't go up. But not Summer. But we'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
Summer's going to talk with Kevin because, and this is not like super vital to what's going on, but there was a little bit of drama. Summer's just going to confront Kevin about a conversation that happened off of the feeds, because she was joking around with Gino about being a first responder, and Kevin made what he describes as like a joke, and she took to mean that that he was offended by something that she said about first responders, and she confronts him about it. He's like, "I'm sorry, I was playing around. I'm sorry." She said she felt shamed about a joke she made, and she felt like only Gino could really, be offended or speak on that as a member of that community, or
Yeah,
at the
but she
very least
wasn't
that.
she wasn't upset though. Like she very much it was like a super adult conversation. Like I
Yes.
think that if she hadn't spoken to Kevin, she might have been upset, by the end of the day, like letting it fester in her mind. But I think that she was like, I don't want to be mad at Kevin, so I'm going to say something to him. And I actually like if I think that like she did this because you can't be emotionless in the Big Brother house, and she doesn't want to have a bad game relationship with Kevin. So she went to him to try to make sure that like they were good, and she needed to say her piece. And I actually really appreciated it.
Yes, and her
Mhm.
primary point was like, if you had an actual issue with what I said, I would have preferred that you like came to me privately afterward instead of saying something publicly.
Mhm.
And he was like, I genuinely, I wasn't even thinking too hard about it. I'm really sorry. I was just playing around. I was just trying to joke with you. And she's like, if I'm not reading your jokes properly, then like we can work on that. He
Mhm.
apologized again. He says, "How can I make it up to you?" She's like, "You don't need to make it up to me." He's like, "Can I make you some tea?" She's like, "No."
Yeah. Mhm.
He starts asking her about a job that she had in a similar field. He says again, it wasn't serious, but it was dumb. She says it's okay. She didn't want to feel like she had to do damage control. She likes him enough that she doesn't want to hate him. She respects him. So we don't know what the joke was or
Mhm.
whatever, but they seem to have hashed it out. I believe she refers to it a little bit later in the day, saying like, like it's fine, it was like strike two, as long as it doesn't happen
Yeah.
again, like no strike three for Kevin.
Yeah, and I think that this is the type of stuff though that like you have to what makes people good Big Brother players is that they know themselves. And I think this
Mhm.
is Summer knowing herself and knowing like, yeah, this was strike two and it wasn't a strike three because they talked it out. And maybe if it had gone a couple days without them talking it out, it would have gotten to a strike three and she would have decided that she was done with him and she didn't want that to happen. So
Mhm.
I thought that it was actually like very mature and on both their parts because Kevin, immediately apologized, saw where she was coming from, was not upset by her coming to him, and I thought it was a nice moment.
Yes. So Moose is going to talk with Tanisha a little bit more, and he lets her know that he really thinks Betty has a secret power. He's very convinced. Uh, Tanisha is not convinced. She's like,
Hmm.
Are you sure? I don't think so." And he's like, "No, no, I think so. I think she's got it. I've been talking about it with Herman. We think she's got a secret power." Put a pin in this for a second. Just keep in mind that because remember, ever since the calls, they've kind of been speculating that Betty might have a secret power. They're still on this. They still think that Betty has a secret power. Um, Jess is going to talk to Kevin. And Jess tells Kevin, like, look, we really have to consider who the target is, because if I put Tanisha up, I have to acknowledge that either one of those nominees could go. So the way that Jess sees it, the structure of the house is, or structure the other side at least, is that Tanisha is essentially the glue that holds a lot of the other side together. That Tanisha has better relationships with people like Herman and Moose than like Summer and Betty do. Whereas Betty and Josh are kind of like over here, and then Summer's there, and then Tanisha's like right in the middle. And so it might be worth it to look at Tanisha as a potential target. They see how much people like Summer and Betty and a lot of people are like fighting so hard to keep Tanisha off the block. They know they'd never fight that hard to keep them off the block, Jess off the block. And Kevin says, look, I hate to say it, but the best thing for your game might be for Tanisha to go. And Jess is like, all right, well, I'm gonna have to sell that Moose is the target, and the only reason to have Tanisha go up is to guarantee the votes against him. But then the votes are up to the House. The House decides. But how do we then get the votes against Tanisha? And they think, well, I think I can get Marty. I think Helena would come with us, because they're pitching for Helena to go. And they start kind of like thinking about the votes there. Part of the hope would be that if T goes, then part of the blame can kind of be spread to the voters, particularly if they get Gino, Jason, Marty to vote against Tanisha. Then it would be like, look, yes, I did put Tanisha on the block, but they're the ones that voted Tanisha out. And they're bigger. They're tighter to each other than they are with me. I'm still kind of on the outs. And so that's kind of like the direction that they're thinking about heading in.
And this is the thing that I'm saying, like, you have to know yourself as a player. Jess has gotten into fights with people in the house because Jess felt disrespected by people not honoring the HOH's wishes and by them making a mockery of their nomination ceremony. So then they want to play up that they really want Moose to go, and then the house flips on them, and then they're going to just be like, oh, I guess the house flipped on me. Like that doesn't track with the way that they think. So they're trying to pull a fast one. But again, like we've said many times, their social capital is not in a place where like that's possible. And this conversation, I think that Jess is doing the classic Big Brother thing that everybody or a lot of people tend to do when they feel bad that they're turning against someone that they enjoy. So they're coming up with like reasons, that they have to do this.
Yeah, and they do mention like I hate to do it. She's such a beautiful person. I love her so much. Stuff like that.
Yeah, and like, I think just trying to absolve themselves of the guilt of, putting two people of color on the block. But if it's gameplay, like let it be gameplay. Don't start talking about how you are sorry for yourself. If you're doing it, you're doing it, and that's all. Like that's my thought on it.
Yeah, and I think that there has been like some discourse around the like the word optics is being used a lot in the house, and I felt like it was introduced by Gino when talking about nominating Marty, the optics of betraying Gino, but now like it is being mentioned because, I think people in this house recognize, especially people that are fans of the show, that like it's starting to shape up. Like all of the people of color are over here and all of the white people are over here. And, it's kind of like, oh, well, how did this happen? Oh man, it's so unfortunate that it happens to be like this, but I guess there's nothing we can do.
And I have to do it, and I am not blind to it. I know that this is happening, but I have no choice. And I think that is the difficult thing to listen to when it's someone who is actively doing it, being like, oh, I hate to have to do it. It's like, enough. Like, if you're going to do something, do it. Don't, like, it's a different situation, but this is like what people took issue with about someone like Nicole Franzel, where it's like she would put herself into a position in the house and then be like, oh, it's so hard to do this, to be in this position. And it's like, well, this is your gameplay. Your gameplay has led you here. So I think that if your gameplay is leading you somewhere, your gameplay is leading you somewhere, and whining about it when you're the person in power is not helpful and inappropriate.
Well, yes. So let's look at the votes here, right? Because with this conversation, it seems the intention from Jess is not only to not target Moose, but to potentially be straight up targeting Tanisha and pushing secretly for Tanisha to go. If this is what Jess decides to do ultimately, and there's a little bit of hesitation there by the end of the day, we'll talk about that when we get there. Then if Kevin is on board, which it seems like he is, then it would be Kevin, Marty, who's definitely on board. Marty's pushing for this. Helena, who is going to promise Jess her vote and would probably be on board with this as well. That's 3 votes. They need 5 to rule the day here, which means that they likely need Gino and Jace. If they have Gino and Jace, they have 5, and that's enough for Tanisha to leave over Moose. On the other side, you have Betty and Summer, who are 100% locked in to keep Tanisha over Moose. And then you have Josh and Herman, who really are not necessarily locked in to keep Tanisha over Moose. Like, I could see either one of them going in a different direction. Josh, primarily because he's working with so many people that if they talk to him about it, it could theoretically happen. Although I think he would be inclined to take out Moose and to go with Betty, even though he's not nearly as close to Betty as a lot of people assume he is. And then Herman, who again I think would be inclined to let go of Moose in that spot, but I could absolutely see deciding to keep Moose because Moose is a better competitor and he wants to work with Moose moving forward. And maybe especially if Jace and Gino are going in that direction, maybe he sees the writing on the wall and decides he wants to move in that direction and be like, look, I'm with you guys. I'm flipping on Tanisha. I could easily see that happening. But the overall key is that I think they need Jace and Gino. And that shouldn't be too hard to make happen, especially with Kevin and Marty and Helena all kind of moving in that direction as well. So it shouldn't be too hard, but Gino is leaning toward wanting Moose out at the moment over Tanisha. Gino would prefer Moose to leave. He feels like Moose is a bigger threat to him, and that Moose is, has been saying his name, and that Tanisha also said his name. And there's a conversation he has with Jess about this, but that Moose is kind of the one he'd want to go. But again, Jason, Gino, pretty easily convinced to flip, so it shouldn't be too difficult. But it's not nearly a guarantee. If Jess wants to do this, that it could happen.
Yeah, and I just want to make it clear what I was saying before is not that I just think that we had this whole conversation about the way that the gameplay could have gone differently and what Jess probably should have done. But if you are, making your bed, lie in it. And, I just don't think that it's appropriate to be, I just don't think that the conversation was appropriate or a way to absolve their guilt of the way that they feel personally about their gameplay, if that makes sense. That's right. All I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I think you got that across. Yeah.
Okay.
And so basically, though, Tanisha's in some trouble. Jess also lets Kevin know that the name of the siblings alliance, and they mentioned that they never felt great about it. They were the ones that had to name it, and Betty didn't even know the name for a while, and it felt very much like they were just kind of being strung along here. And so Kevin now knows the name of the siblings. Kevin is going to go and talk to Betty after this conversation. I just thought this is just a funny interaction. He goes to Betty and she's like, so are you going up? He's like, It's a possibility, I think, but please don't tell anyone. She's like, oh, I won't. I swear on, I forget the name, but my family's life, essentially. And he's like, no, don't do that. Don't swear on your family's life. She's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I don't even know why I did that. I don't know why I felt the need to say that at all. Can I take that back? And he's like, yes, please. She's like, can I instead swear on my old cat Hope, who passed away? He's like, no. Don't just say you won't swear. Just say you won't say anything to anybody. Don't swear on your dead cat. No. Just don't swear on anything.
Betty's an icon. That's all I have to say. Icon.
I just loved it, like, because there was a moment there where it felt like they were completely in sync. Like, oh, yeah, we both agree. That was a terrible thing to do. Don't swear on your family's life. And she's like, can I take it back? He's like, yes, please. Thank you. Let's get back on the same page here. She's like, yeah, instead, can I swear on my dead cat? He's like, that's worse.
It's perfect. Never change, Betty. Never change. We love you. It's perfect. Are you kidding? It's perfect because both I love this like Betty Kevin thing going on because they're the two showmen of the season, right? Like they're the two who are like turning out in terms of our entertainment, and them together is like dynamite. It's just perfect. Like every Betty Kevin conversation has been fantastic, and I hope this makes the show because hilarious. They're great. Both of them are great and even better together. I feel like usually when you have like multiple showmen in the house, they sort of like don't like each other and don't get along, which, but also like they have this back and forth where they're it's just perfect. It's perfection. Again, never change.
Yeah. So Tanisha's gonna talk with Jess now. Tanisha at first pitches that Gino should go up. And when Jess is essentially saying, I don't really want to do that. I do want Moose out. I don't want Gino to go over Moose. Tanisha instead is going to suggest Helena or Kevin. Really just kind of like throwing all the names out, giving all the ammunition. Jess says again, like, I don't have a good enough relationship with Kevin or Helena to put them on the block and have them be okay with it. Tanisha says like, well, I would get over it if you put me on the block, but I don't think Summer and Betty would. I think they'd be pretty upset. And Jess is like, yeah, and they go on for a while, but it's pretty much the same conversation. Even Tanisha after this conversation is like, I don't want to have to talk to Jess again. I feel like it's not going to go anywhere.
And also Jess starts doing this thing later in the day because I think Jess is nervous because they know that Summer and Tanisha and Betty are not, or specifically Summer and Tanisha are not happy with them. So they keep doing this thing where they'll like be in conversation in the middle of a large group of people and be like, Tanisha, do you want to talk to me again? And Tanisha's like, no, I'm good. And they're like, oh, okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure you got your time in. And Tanisha's like, yeah, got my time in. And it's very awkward. I feel like there were several moments like that. No?
Yes, no, definitely. Tanisha goes to Betty and Summer afterward, explains the conversation with Jess. And Betty's like, I get it. Like, she doesn't want to put Kevin up on the block because the votes might flip on Kevin. And Summer's like, I don't get it. I think it should be Kevin. It should definitely not be Tanisha. I'm not down for this. Betty's like, I do think Helena makes the most sense. And Betty thinks like, I mean, regardless of what happens, I think obviously we have the votes to keep Tanisha. Probably because they think they've got, like Helena and they also will later talk about like even Summer's like, oh, Kevin's gonna be so mad at Jess for putting up Tanisha. So they unfortunately, and it might be true, like, not that Kevin would be mad, but it might be true that they have the votes. You never know, but it's definitely not looking as good as they think it does at this point in time. And I think Summer realizes that too, because Summer's like really going to fight hard for Tanisha to not go up on the block, which I think is absolutely the right play, even though it's basically fruitless at this point. I think that it is the right play, because then like, even if then like, let's say Tanisha does go, Now Summer has a body of evidence to suggest that she's a very loyal ally to pick up, right? And if Tanisha doesn't go, then great, right? So
if you know that it's between your closest ally and someone you're not super close with to go on the block, which is the way it's being framed to Summer, and you know that you aren't a possibility because Summer's name has not been thrown around at all by Jess as a possibility to go up, I definitely think pushing hard is the way to go, for sure.
So Summer's saying at this point, like, I think Jess has got to go sooner rather than later. Maybe a good backdoor target for us moving forward. The siblings are done, especially if Tanisha goes out. Even if at this point, even if Tanisha doesn't go on the block, the siblings are done. And so Summer leaves. That's Summer's position. Betty lets Tanisha know. She says, "Hey, guess what? What? I've been purposely acting sus around like Herman and Gino and Moose and them, like to make them think I have a secret power. But I've only told you and Summer this, but I'm trying to get them to think that I have a power. And they're like asking me questions like, I don't want to talk about it. I think they believe me.
Never change, Betty. Never change. I love Betty so much. This is fantastic.
Like, I think this will help me.
I mean, and on Survivor, people pretend to have immunity idols all the time. Yeah. The problem is a Big Brother power is not an immunity idol. And Big Brother powers mean everybody is in danger. And it's like a whole, like it's more reason sort of to go after someone. So never change, Betty. Never change. I don't know how many more times on this update I'm going to say I love Betty, but we'll get more. Hopefully there's more to come.
Well, Jess is going to talk with Herman next, and it's mostly like it's an apology session where they're like, oh, I'm sorry that I put you on the block, and I'm sorry that I won the veto, and I'm sorry that things are sorry. And Herman lets them know about the new philosophy of wanting to work with players that are winning challenges. This is a new pitch to most people. There's still some tension in the conversation, though, as Jess continues to explain lots of things about reasonings and trajectories. Herman is like, I think it's fair to say that I caused your trajectory in the game by putting you up week one because Kevin was up on the block too, and Kevin's in a different place, and blah blah blah. And there's some tension here. It's clearly not like a super solid conversation. He says at the end of the conversation, I'm 95% sure I wouldn't put you up if I won HOH next week. And then after he leaves, Jess is like, 95%.
That's not 100. I mean, I mean, I don't know. I'm not like Herman should be lying to Jess because Herman is safe and Jess can't play next week. So like, I mean, 95% I think is more than a lot of people who had to win the veto to win safety and then had the HOH blaming them for their poor gameplay would say. So, someone in the chat says 95% is margin of error. So yeah.
Yeah.
What about Betty's secret power? Then I'm 95% barring Betty's secret power that you won't go on the block.
Who knows? Betty might force the situation. Jess is going to talk to Marty, and Marty's like, I've made up with Gino. We're good. And Jess is like, perfect. Just keep acting like you don't get along. He's like, great. They decided at some point they were just going to tell Jess, I guess, that they're cool now, but still not publicly, whatever. Herman talks to Gino again, pitches the same thing, same strong player pitch, but this time without Jace there. And Gino has not had the conversation with Marty or with Jace about not really trusting Herman. Gino is definitely more in on this than Jace or Marty. The players that they say that they're looking at, they want to take the strong players as far as possible, which means they got to get out Kevin, Helena, Betty, and Summer. And this is really like how far Summer has fallen in Gino's eyes and in Herman's eyes, that they're both looking at her as a floater that they don't really value very much in the game and are looking to take out.
Which is wild. Summer is up there working her butt off to make sure that her allies are safe. Like a floater What are you talking? Like, that is wild to me that that's the perception that they have of her. And I'm sure it comes back to the fact that Summer basically told Herman that she wasn't willing to use the veto on him.
Yeah.
So he's like, oh, she's a floater. But maybe that
And
should be.
and the implication that she's throwing competitions. I think those two things really tanked her with Herman. And I think that with Gino, it's what we talked about before as well, where it's like after she was kind of like the driving force to get him to put Kyle up on the block, she, that he's like, I feel like I would have gotten more out of that relationship after that happened, and like nothing has really come from it, and so he's feeling a bit neglected.
I see.
Now,
Okay.
I don't think Summer would be their first target of these four. Certainly not for Herman. I think Herman obviously would go for Kevin and Helena first. But and I'm sure that Gino would probably go for like Betty first, barring a secret power. But they have this conversation, and Gino, I think, is decently on board with this, especially considering his conversation with Jess that's going to happen right after. But before we get there, Herman does suggest, what if we got Kevin up on the block and took Kevin out this week? Gino's like, I don't know about that, but yeah, I think I want Moose gone, but we can talk. Gino talks to Jess afterward. He says he's good with Marty. All that's cleared up. Jess mentions that the other side of the house is still trying to get him on the block. Tanisha was pushing Gino pretty hard. Gino says, I do feel good about Herman. I think I can work with Herman. I think that there's something there that we can work with moving forward. And he says, if you want Moose gone, Tanisha should go up. If Tanisha goes up, it will be unanimous. Moose will leave. That's what I want. I want Moose to go. So that's where Gino's head is at. And Jess is not going to do anything to try and be like, well, what about Tanisha leaving at this point in time, at least. At this point, if you're Jess and you're looking to get Tanisha out, the thing you're probably primarily concerned about is Herman's influence over Gino's position between Moose and Tanisha, and what that might mean. As of right now, Gino is somewhat influenced by Herman, and he is looking to take out Moose over Tanisha. That's important to note, considering that Gino and Jace are kind of the keys to making Tanisha go this week.
Yes.
So there you go. Jess is going to talk with Helena. This is, basically Jess tells Helena her name is being pitched. Helena's like, I figured. Helena lets Jess know, I will vote however you want if Tanisha goes up. My vote is yours. So that's an easy one. But then things get a little tricky because Jess is going to sit down with Moose very briefly in front of Summer and just kind of like, hey, can we just, how are things, right? Like I imagine how this started. I think the feeds were down when it started. They're rehashing the conversation that happened the day before, and it doesn't go any better than it did the day before. It doesn't get into what it went into before, but it was basically like, just like, I don't want us to be in a weird place. I just want us to be like, are we okay now? And Moose is like, I just didn't want my words to be misconstrued. And it basically was just like a big ol' nothing of a conversation. Jess mentioned like, yeah, I don't remember exactly what the words were. I just remembered the message of the words. And they're both still obviously have their heels dug in here. And it ends pretty quickly. Summer's making a face during the whole thing that is pretty funny. And Jess goes off into the HOH room by themselves afterward and says, Moose has got to go. And they go straight from there to Kevin and Marty, who are talking in the bedroom, and says, look, guys, we need to figure out a way for Moose to go. I need to put somebody up that guarantees Moose goes. And they're like, what? I thought we were doing Tanisha. And they're like, oh, just whoever goes up that makes sure that Moose leaves. And they're like, okay, I don't understand. They're like, I just talked to him again. He was just trying to rile me up. I feel like he's always going to be coming for me. And Jess leaves, and Marty's like, what the hell? Like, why are they going back and forth about this? Like, it should be so obvious. You just put Tanisha on the block. What is happening? I don't like this.
Yeah, Marty is upset by this and starts to get upset. And Kevin's like, hey, take a breath. Like, we'll figure it out. There's time. It's okay. Like, I just think Jess is just, they are emotional. They're an emotional player. And I think that it has to be confusing when you're working with somebody and all day long you've been having multiple check-ins with them to ensure that like this is the path that we're on, and then all of a sudden they walk into a room that you're in and are like, the plan has completely changed. I didn't even have that plan before. Because I think anyone working with an ally like that is like, okay, what?
Never do this.
It's very this is like, you want to talk about poor social play, like it's something like this, because it's not only just social but it's strategic too. Everybody's like, where is this coming from? And
yes. So Jess also goes to Josh right after and has the same conversation. I need to figure out a way, because the conversation with Josh before was like, if you want this, do this. If you want that, do that. So then Jess is going to go to Josh, interrupt his workout, and sit him down and be like, I need to figure out a way to get Moose to go. He's like, we already did talk about this. Like, because this is the thing. Jess knows the way for Moose to go. Like, Josh has already told Jess, if you want Josh to leave, you put up Tanisha, or like one of the women.
Moose to leave.
So yeah, if you want Moose to leave, you put up one of the women. And so when they're like, I want Moose to go, he's like, yeah, so put up one of the women. But because what they're actually looking for here, I think, is just a place to vent about Moose, right? Like, I just I want confirmation. Like, Moose is leaving, right? We need to make sure Moose leaves. I need to do something about how I feel right now.
Yes.
And they're doing that with their allies. And so they have that conversation with Josh. Now, the big question obviously is this just a momentary emotional blip on the radar? Will this go back to Tanisha? Or is this going to stick? I would imagine it's just a momentary blip. I think that Jess is a player that wants to be strategic rather than emotional, despite having, these feelings. However, I also could see that if these, interactions continue throughout the week, that if they happen enough, they could interrupt the planning needed to take Tanisha out, because Jess is constantly going back and forth, that there's not going to be enough time or like structure around the plan to get Tanisha out, because it does require planning and making sure that everyone's on the same page, whereas Moose is the default. So if Jess is kind of going back and forth and preventing anything from like coming together, then that could default for a Moose boot here. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's just something for you to track during the week, Taran. Aren't you happy that you get to talk about all the back and forth for the rest of the week?
Look, I'm happy for all of us that this season is just so wild and interesting all the time. It's just, just a lot of work.
It's wild because we're an hour 8 in and there's still like a huge conversation we have to talk about. Like, I'm like, there's like I still have like a decent chunk of notes left for us to talk about.
Yeah, we'll get through it. We'll a lot of the stuff to come is kind of like just solidifying stuff too. So we can breeze through some of this. Summer is going to talk with Herman, Tanisha, and Betty. Summer says that after watching Jess and Moose interact, that they feel like that she feels like Jess slipped up a little bit in the conversation with Moose. That when Jess said, I don't remember exactly what was said, I just remember the message. They feel like Jess is actually the one lying in this situation. They think that Jess is actually the one who is making stuff up, and she says this to Betty, and Betty's kind of like, I did kind of talk with Moose. I feel like I'm good with Moose now, and it seems like Betty is starting to turn around on the whole situation. Betty was very pro Jess, anti Moose after the altercation. Now it seems like, especially with the help of Summer, Betty is starting to feel like, okay, maybe I'm anti Jess and pro Moose in the whole situation. Maybe Moose was really the one telling the truth in this spot. So that is a bit of a shift. Not enough to probably make any kind of impact on Betty's vote or anything, but worth noting.
Yes, definitely.
Um,
And
so yes, we the one of the biggest and longest conversations of the day was Summer then going to Jess and pitching
mhm.
very hard for Jess to not put up Tanisha. Um, this conversation appears to be fruitless at this time. You never
Mhm.
know with these Summer conversations. Sometimes she breaks through, but at this time, it feels like this did not really go anywhere. But Summer tried very hard for I mean, this is a very long conversation, mostly because Jess is continuing to give these fake reasons for why it needs
Mhm.
to be Tanisha,
Yes.
essentially. And Summer is not willing to just be like, that doesn't make sense to me, but whatever. Summer is like, let's dive in and figure out
Mhm.
exactly what you're saying. And let me point out exactly why it's nonsense to
Mhm.
every single point while still being Summer, like super courteous and like friendly. But
Like,
at the same time, pointing out, like, if you do this, you're dead to me.
yeah, like it's so wild because if you read this conversation on Twitter and you were reading what Summer was saying, you would be like, oh my gosh, like Summer is like threatening Jess in terms of like, I'm coming after you if you do this. But the way that Summer was saying it was like very much like Summer was like, if you put me up, I would be like, hell to the no, no way, and it's like very flippant and like very sweet. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm like, Summer is acting so sweet, but not fake sweet either. Like keeping it's amazing how Summer is able to keep the tone of the conversation so light while, like
Mhm.
you said, saying very distinctly, you're going to draw a line in the sand here. And I just think that it was fascinating to watch. Like I think that it was fantastic, honestly. It was fantastic.
Yeah, and I think that, like, what I really liked about this conversation is a couple of things. One is that like, especially in this house where people have been so flippant about letting their allies leave, having
Mhm.
somebody who is willing to fight this hard for an ally, I think is a great thing. I think that Big Brother. I've said this before, but Big Brother's often talked about as like, a cutthroat game where you betray people, you stab people in the back, and yes, that's definitely true. But not until the end. Like, you should never be
Mhm.
ditching or stabbing allies in the back until you absolutely have to in the end game, or if it's like maybe slightly near the end game because it's like one of those situations where you know that one of you is going to stab the other. You need to get them first, but you don't do that in the pre-jury. You definitely don't do that in the first couple of weeks. And when you have a ride or die like Summer and Tanisha, you don't do it at all. You just bring them to the end because Summer wins. And so, or honestly, at this point, maybe Tanisha. I think by the end, they'd realize that Summer's the
Yeah.
walkover. Um, but
Mhm.
but either way, I really appreciate that Summer's like really riding hard here, and I think that there is value to
Mhm.
that as well. It's something that Dan Giesling in season 10 built a lot of his own social capital on. Was, yeah, everyone hates Brian, but I'm gonna go down with that ship. I'm gonna give him my vote. I'm gonna whatever, right? So
Mhm.
I think that this will help Summer in the event that Tanisha leaves, which is not impossible this week. There's little she could have done about it, but I think that completely jumping ship and being like, yeah, I'll let Tanisha go would be a bad look and it would make things worse for her. Whereas fighting this hard, I
Mhm.
think, is a good thing. And being like, a line will be drawn is great because it will allow her to, in the future, if Tanisha leaves, be in a position to either keep that line there if it benefits her, or be like, look, I'm willing to forgive and forget. I think we can work together and feel like like she's giving them something now, even though they were the one that
Mhm.
took from her. Right. So I like that. I also like that she is willing to sit down and go through the arguments point by point, bit by bit, and point out how wrong they are while maintaining this level of like friendly, I'm
Yes.
trying to help you atmosphere, and saying like you will screw yourself if you don't do if you do this, while again maintaining this level of like I'm just doing this to help you. Because on the off chance, because Summer's read is that Jess is playing them, right? Summer's read is that Jess is just straight up wants to do this and nothing's going to help. But despite that, unlike some of the other players in this house and in previous houses, who would be like, I just don't even want to bother. It's just annoying to. Summer's like, all right, on the off chance that my read is wrong and that Jess is genuinely just doing this because they're dumb, like I'm gonna sit here for 2 hours and do the work to point out, like, because if Jess was actually coming from those places, I think after this conversation they would be like, you know what, I'm not putting up Tanisha. Like the only way you sit through this conversation for 2 hours, listen to all of these points, and don't put up Tanisha is if you are for sure just like faking those reasons, right? And that's what Summer gets out of this. She now knows with certainty that Jess is not actually doing this for those reasons. And if they were doing it for those reasons, then it probably would have worked and they wouldn't have done it.
Exactly. And I think that the conversation is just, it's great because again, it's like there was a point when Summer was like, since this morning, I feel like things have been odd with us. And Jess is like, yeah, that makes me think that you don't trust me. And it's like, but Summer is pointing out, like, the only reason I'm feeling that way is because you've been odd with me, and like really poking holes in all of Jess's, warped sort of logic where they're playing Summer. And like you said, I completely agree.
Yes. Okay. So there's a whole thing with Herman here in the night. We're almost an hour and 20 in. It's not going to matter. So I'm going to abbreviate a lot of it. Basically, Herman comes up with a plan to convince Jess to get Kevin up on the block, and then they'll flip the vote and they'll take Kevin out of the game, and they'll keep Moose. And he talks to a bunch of people about it. He organizes it. He figures out what he's going to say to Jess. He gets it all ready. He thinks it's going to happen. He thinks he can make this happen. There's no reason to expect that it will happen. If for some reason this works and Kevin goes up on the block and goes home this week, I will apologize tomorrow and I will give you the full rundown on everything that Herman did here. But I think we have a lot of reason to believe that this was all kind of a fruitless effort and, is not really going to go anywhere.
But will you eat some chapstick?
No.
Okay. All right. You're not serious about that then, huh?
Yeah.
You heard it here first, guys. It's a 95% chance. I'm kidding. Clearly.
So I mean, that's mostly where we are for the day. Coming into today, Herman, I think, is still looking to try and enact this plan. He mentioned he told Helena about it, and Helena was like not having it at all. Gave like what was she gave like a gesture after he left, like, oh my god, like pulled her hair, like, oh my god, and was annoyed about it. So again, I have no reason to believe this will actually work at this time, but he might try it with Jess. I think we have every reason to believe that Tanisha will still be going up on the block. The biggest question is, will Jess come back around to wanting to target Tanisha? If they do, will they be able to get Jace and Gino on board? Will everybody be on board to make the move happen? If so, will people like Herman and Josh move over with them as well and make this something like a 7-4, or 7 to what would be the vote? 7 to 2 vote. Would it be 2? Yeah. So will that happen, or will Jess, be too flip-floppy throughout the week to make any concrete plan for that to happen? Happen, or will Jess stick to wanting Moose out now, and just let that be the plan? That is likely what we're looking for today. I would imagine that by today we know at least what the intended plan is. But you just never know with this house.
Yeah. But today is renom day. So
yes.
I do think that will at least, solidify that, and there will be less pitching about what the renom is and more vote talk. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So that's about what we have. Maggie, anything else we need to bring up?
No, I think that you guys got an hour and 20 of me. And I think that I said sort of what I needed to say. And I just like the work that you've been doing, I know has been so much. There's so much to watch, so much changing. Thanks, Taran, for, all of your every hour plus long update you've been doing when we're 30 days into this season. Like how after the first 2 weeks usually are that, because it's so many people in the house. Like we're down to, like, we're about to enter the jury phase and we're going an hour 20. So it's super great. And I've been having fun with the season. I've been having a good time. It has been so much has been happening that it's been hard to just like keep up casually when I'm, if I'm busy. So sometimes I'll leave for a weekend, or, I was sick last weekend and couldn't watch feeds or listen to podcasts for a couple of days and was like, I have to study. I was like, oh my gosh. But I've just been having a great time with the season, and it's been very fun.
Yes. Well, I think we can all be grateful that there is so much work to be done, that there's so much going on, and that this has been an interesting season. So thank you all so much for joining us. You can, of course, find me over on Twitch, twitch.tv/Taran Armstrong. I'll be watching tonight's episode live with all of you, 7 p.m. Eastern. And then after the episode, we'll be live to recap it here on RHAP as a podcast. Then tomorrow morning, I'll be back for another live feed update at 11 a.m. Eastern to update you on everything that happens today on the Big Brother Canada 10 live feeds. And tomorrow night, we'll have our next roundtable. We'll rate these players again, see where they all stand. And then we'll keep it running through the week. Wednesday and Thursday episodes live on Twitch after the episodes with the podcasts. All of it's happening. Check out the Taran Show with pre-renom this week, which was very fun. And find me over on Twitter at Armstrong Taran. Maggie, what are you up to?
Right now, I am watching Temptation Island with the fantastic and incredible Kirsten McInnes over on the Hot Dummies on Islands RHAP feed. And this week, our guest is none other than the bidet king himself, Jacob Jones. Ooh. So he's going to be joining us. I know you'll definitely tune into that one, Taran. So you guys don't even really have to watch Temptation Island, if I'm being honest. Like, this is the type of show where if you enjoy me and Kirsten, just come hang out with us. I don't watch 90 Day Fiance, and I listen every week to Puya and Rob. The people that they talk about, it's like I'm listening to a narrative podcast, and like they're telling me a story because I didn't watch the show. It's very fun. You can do the same thing to the Temptation Island RHAP up. So yeah, come check us out there. And you can find me on Instagram at @MLMorgan_.
There you go. Well, thank you all so much for joining us here today. And I will see all of you next time.